Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to a brand new Social Confoes. I'm your host, Shaluk, together here with Diego. Diego, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. And with that being said, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/ at Confoes. We're also on Instagram at Confoes and subscribe to our newsletter at confoes.substack.com. There's goodies to come, I think, within the next week or so. End of the month, I think, right?
Yeah, we're putting the content to have like a structure and then actually maintain maintain it, because I think that's the most difficult part about putting out content is the consistency. So we've
Right.
been really consistent with recording these episodes over the past year, but we have been less consistent with putting the micro content out there, which you will probably see more of. So even if you look this episode back a year from now, 2 years from now, you might see a major shift. You might see a major difference between as we are talking now, just recording every week instead of constantly putting the content out there.
Yeah,
That
because
being
the idea
said,
of putting a lot of content out is you never know when you might find that needle in a haystack. And there's maybe that one quote, that evergreen content. And speaking of quantity, to diverge into the topic of today, there's also these needles in haystacks in quantities on national days, holidays, international prestigious days. And I thought it'd be interesting to discuss them because I think last week we were discussing topics and you mentioned it was National Relaxation Day or something. I looked it up.
yeah.
Yeah, it was. But then when I looked it up, it was one of maybe 20 or 30 other commemorative days that are being celebrated in some part of the world to some degree. And that got me thinking, where do all these holidays, national days come from? Some are, common, internationally celebrated, like, Easter, Christmas, New Year's. But then you have some very niche ones, some very mainstream ones, some very pop culture ones, some historical ones, like Independence Day. So, depending on the nation. But every day has at least 10 to 15 days. And
Okay.
it would be interesting to explore these.
So today's
So, do you know what day
let's
today? Yeah, let's start with
yeah,
today.
let's start with
August
today, and
August
I want to jump
22nd.
in. Yeah, I want to jump in. So today is the National Tooth Fairy Day. I mean, that's fun already, right? And then if you're gonna talk about fairies and we're talking about like what's your favorite national day, right? Like what's your favorite national day to celebrate? And then we can even go into uh Christmas, for instance. Like it's really hard to compare a national day with a national holiday or an internationally renowned holiday. But could we go back all the way to those times, like the origin of Christmas?
I actually don't know what the origin of Christmas is. Like,
So it's
how far
religious,
back
right?
does it goes?
Originally.
Yeah, yeah, it's religious, and then it
Okay,
got
so
shifted or merged into presents, and then that with Saint Nick on delivering presents. So I'm kind of blurred between those two, and it's kind of merged into one.
have you seen the epic rap battle between Santa Claus and Moses?
Probably. I've seen all of them when they came out, but this has
Okay,
been like
so
years now, like 10 years ago.
basically Moses in that one is played by Snoop Dogg, right? So it's already legendary for that because Snoop Dogg is playing Moses and he's battling Santa Claus in a rap battle. And at a certain point, he says that basically he has been through the book of God, through the Bible, and there's no recollection of being like somebody dressed up as a Santa Claus with, and of course it's bars on bars, so it's much more
Yeah.
funny when you hear it compared to me just telling the story. But that's already like, wait a minute, we, I mean, Christmas, and that's the reason why some religions don't celebrate Christmas. But Christmas is actually originally a religious holiday, but somehow Santa Claus got involved to it. And I think Santa Claus got involved to it through commercialization,
Hmm.
because there wasn't a Santa Claus involved. And all of a sudden,
Coca-Cola.
Coca-Cola,
Yeah.
actually, Santa Claus is connected to Coca-Cola. For most people might not even know it, but it's somehow connected to Coca-Cola, because how is Coca-Cola allowed to make all these commercials with Santa Claus in it? And when you have a Christmas caravan and Coca-Cola goes out there in all these different countries and they celebrate Christmas, it's almost like they own Christmas. Like there's not an I can really cannot think of another brand who has a bigger association with Christmas than Coca-Cola, for instance.
Hmm.
And then you get to the
Like,
origin story, and that's the last thing I'm going to say, and then I'm handing it over to you again, is Sinterklaas, which is the Dutch celebration of Children's Day on December 5th, actually pre-existed Santa Claus. So there's
yeah.
also some discussion that Santa Claus, which literally translated to Dutch, I think is around about the same as Sinterklaas. But people claiming that Sinterklaas was actually the original, and
So you have
it was just
Sinterklaas
copied
and
to
you
Santa
have
Claus.
Saint Nick, right?
Yeah, Saint Nicholas. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Sinterklaas is also a derivative of Saint Nicholas, which is also another character in yeah, I wouldn't call it history, but yeah, but another character that came upon
Yeah, of
these
the different
national
folklore in
days.
the
Yeah, in the
European Union,
folklore.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So this comes to because I was scrolling through the list. So today is National Tooth Fairy Day, and you have World Plant Milk Day, Never Been Better Day, animal related. So
Nay, nay,
it's
nay,
kind of
never
crazy.
been better.
Never been better. Yeah.
Bean.
Wait,
I
wait.
think the name
Bean.
it's
Oh,
bean.
wait. Bean. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Bean.
yeah. Never been better. So there's also some
Some wordplay in it. And
yeah.
the other thing that triggered me because I was scrolling through Instagram and then I saw some people share it's World Tourism Day today, and a lot of people Instagram has this option now that you can reshare photos and go on the hype wagon to basically group those stories. And then I
But
looked it
isn't
up.
World Tourism Day a little bit
World
later?
Tourism is September 27th.
Yeah,
So
right?
this
So
kind
how
of
did it
baffled me, or not really baffled me, but this just goes to show that if someone posts something on media, social media especially nowadays, if you have some matter of influence and 2 to 3 people with a larger influence catch on to it, suddenly everyone starts posting it. And then you think like, okay, does the significance of that day still hold the same weight, same value? Or is it, okay to just celebrate? Obviously, I think it's okay to celebrate any type of event, any day, any time of the year. But there is a significance to marking a specific day. The UN went as far as to mark certain international celebrated days to officialize them so that nation state members of the UN can adopt them if they wish. So how do you view that as in
because it's
the localized national days versus the international world days? Because that's also a
so
difference.
that's what, because Real's comment on LinkedIn makes it very clear, like, okay, but which country has the most days though?
I have a take
And I
on this. I
think
have a take on
and
this, but
and and just to think about it, that we're not even there yet. We're not even talking about actual days that are celebrated that get like a recognition and means people get a day off in that specific country. Now we're just talking about national days that can be celebrated, and there's so many. Like you mentioned, they're like 20 per day or something. So
Yeah, at least.
yeah,
Like August alone has like 500, maybe.
500. Yeah. So it's on average it's at least 10 a day. So you can really go okay, and it's very diverse. That's something I do have to say. And like there are some that we regularly celebrate. I mean, I can get into those. Um, but there are also a lot of days that it's good to have them because there's awareness for that specific topic. So I think from that perspective, it's good. But you also have to focus on, I mean, Suriname, for instance, we have a lot of national holidays already. So if you just do the national holidays, how many do you get? Like, I think 15 already or something. This year, there's even
Yes.
more because we have like big round numbers, so certain years. So then you get a little bit more because these are like anniversary national days. But I think that's already a lot. And then when you on top of that get the national days, it can be
So,
overwhelming. But you don't
uh,
have to get into all of them, right?
yeah, no, but I want to go into the nomenclature as well, like the naming convention. When we talk about, because what the UN recognizes are the international days, these are
Yeah.
internationally recognized. But then you have these Tooth Fairy National Tooth Fairy
Tooth
Day,
Fairy Day.
National Relaxation Day. It has the word national in it. And national
So
means it
which nation?
originates, exactly, it originates from a nation. So, and then other people, maybe through media, caught onto it and thought, oh, this is something fun. This is something, an activity that we could partake in as well. Why not do it, even though it is
So
not something
how
considered
many of them
within their
are US
nations.
based?
I think a lot. If we look at the influence of media and just the example I saw today of Instagram, a lot comes from Western media
Yeah.
because a lot gets propagated through those channels as well, through Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, social media. And because of the hashtag algorithms that we kind of topic based that we kind of talked about when we discuss the platforms, it starts catching on and people start recognizing and they want to get on the bandwagon.
Yeah. So but
So I do think
since you as a
on
different country
uh,
jumped
uh,
into all these national days that the US provides.
so to Reol's question, I think the US has the most of these niche days, to for a lack of a better term,
Niche days.
like yeah, niche
Yeah, I
days.
definitely think so. I definitely think so. But if you're talking about actual national days that you get a day off or something,
Yeah, so
there's
recognized
really
by the
not.
country as a
Yeah, really not that many. I think there. I don't think there's a country that goes over 20 of those days. I really don't think so.
no,
Which
that
can seem like a lot because
because
that's
that goes
already
into
more than
productivity, right?
5%.
That's a month. That's a
Yeah,
month, basically a month of product. 20 days is 4 weeks, 4 working weeks.
yeah.
If you
You
were
lose
to,
quite, and you lose a lot of productivity, especially if those days are on a Tuesday or on a Thursday.
yeah.
That kind of completely breaks the flow if you're especially if you're an entrepreneur or you run a business you kind of lose a lot with those kind of days. I actually had a colleague. I won't name his name, but he knows if I talk about this, he knows that I'm talking about him. I had a colleague who, if there was a national holiday on a Thursday or on a Tuesday, he would take the Friday or the Monday off, and
Yeah,
he
to
would
extend the
schedule
weekend.
it. So by the beginning of the year, he would have
In,
already handed in his his leave. Like just like you were like, why is he? You're like, how does he know? But he would do it like
he,
half a year to a year in
man
advance.
plans
He would
ahead.
already take his leave on those days, and he would have long weekends of 4 days. And it was amazing. It was pretty cool how he already like before you know that day was gonna be like a national holiday. He had already booked like the in between days, the Fridays and the Mondays, to have a long weekend. It was pretty impressive, I have to say.
So coming back to the origins, I think the national days that you talk about where people get off has some kind of historic significance or commemoration, right, to the
Yeah.
country, to the localized country. And that's a fair point, because you pay respects, you remind yourself or celebrate an occasion of being grateful, thankful of what happened in the past. And then you have the international days. I think a few of them, Easter and Christmas, would be the ones that are pretty widespread, I would say.
So,
And
but because they're also connected to the school system in
yeah,
general, right? And it's a little more in some countries than others. But you have Easter holiday, especially for us here in Suriname. I think it's a little different in European countries, but you have Easter holiday and you have the end of the year, the Christmas holiday. So basically, those are two are the main, really big recognized. But then you get a difference, for instance, like uh, Good Friday. I don't recall that every country in the world celebrates Good Friday, for instance, or gets the Friday from Good Friday if they
but
get it
Good
off.
Friday is related to
It's
Easter,
to
right?
Easter. It's to
Yeah,
Easter, but I don't recall that all countries in the world even have that Friday off. So
right.
Easter, the second day of Easter, yes, the second day of
Because it is
Christmas.
mainly a Christian holiday, right?
Yeah, but it's been commercialized.
Yeah. Aside
Both
from that,
Christmas and Easter have really been
it
commercialized.
is basically thanks to the commercialization that it has been
Yes.
adopted and accepted internationally.
Yes.
So technically, if any of these niche days get enough commercialization, they could end up internationally renowned.
I don't know if how easy it goes because I think religious holidays have a higher chance.
Yeah, because it
Like
has historic weight and kind of, yeah, religious weight as well. But it has a
so
lot of
holy
history behind it.
let's compare Valentine's Day and Holy, for instance.
Oh
Like
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Holy is definitely one of the bigger holidays, and even internationally, I think not a lot of countries, only the countries that have a strong Indian origin will most likely celebrate Holi. And in a lot of countries, it's not even
But it's
celebrated
getting
as
more
much in it.
recognition, and it
Yeah,
is thanks to the commercialization.
definitely. And
That
it's
it,
very commercial. It's a very easy holiday to commercialize, not from a religious perspective, because no, most people don't understand what Holi is about, or only partly understand what it's about. But it's a holiday of good, so that already resonates a lot. And there's definitely, if you have the Indian origin, like for instance in Suriname, we celebrate. It's a national holiday, and we don't do everything when it comes to the religious part, but we kind of do everything when it comes to the national holiday part. So that's interesting. But if you compare that to Valentine's Day, like Valentine's Day has been, we have talked about this on social Confoes as well, has been much more commercialized, like much more. But I don't think, I would think Holi has a better chance, even internationally, not just here. Here it's already a national holiday, but I think Holi has a much better chance of internationally being recognized as a holiday than Valentine's Day. Valentine's Day will always be uh, a national day
agreed,
or an international day
because
celebrated, but you won't get
yeah,
days off for it.
no, uh, because it doesn't have the cultural impact, as in the ethnic cultural impact such as Holi has in the belief and the religion, that it's meant to be for the people. And so uh, we've ventured into the different types of days that we could have, right? You have the religious holidays, the historical holidays, and these basically through legislative action become recognized by the government or by the nation, and it's implemented in the system, right? And historic significance, cultural, international observance, and then you have the niche ones. Those are kind of grassroots movements that kind of pop up every now and then, and those are the ones that kind of populate the huge numbers that you see in the lists of databases.
And of course, it also, like Consuela says, it really depends on the country's focus.
Because I'm actually not familiar with how it is in the Middle East and Asia. If you're talking about holidays, I can say a bit about Japan, but that's due to watching anime. And then you have like this golden week where everything is like, I think for a week or so, everything is pushed back a week. But these are very specific days. And it's quite different from how it's not even present in the Western Hemisphere. I'd say, although some of the internationalized holidays do penetrate the Eastern societies, I think, such as Christmas and Valentine.
Yeah, so and then like if you take China, Chinese New Year, I mean, it really depends. Again, like for
So is
instance, we
Chinese
celebrate
New Year
Chinese New
because
Year as well.
I had the discussion when I was in New Zealand with my Asian friends from Vietnam,
Yeah.
Malaysia, because they celebrate it as Lunar New Year and not as Chinese New Year, whereas it is the
Yeah.
same thing,
Yep.
but it is the
It's the same
lunar
thing.
calendar.
Just
Yeah.
yeah, but just
Whereas,
different.
yeah, we interpret it, or we more commonly know it as Chinese New Year because the influence of China across the world is much more prominent.
So here's the interesting part. Let's say China is a really interesting example, right? Because China only celebrates like for all of China, it's less than 10 holidays. So that's really interesting. They celebrate New Year's Day. They celebrate that. They do celebrate it. They
Like the
ce-
Lunar New Year or the
no, just New Year's,
calendar
like
New Year,
International New Year's Day.
New Year's. Yeah,
And
yeah.
then the only other non-Chinese holiday, international holiday, is International Labor Day.
Mhm.
So Labor Day, May 1st, is like internationally acknowledged even in China, and New Year is internationally acknowledged even in China. And all the others are like connected to the Lunar New Year, right? Or the lunar year, or connected somewhat to China. But in some regions in China, they do celebrate like specific social groups or the holiday schemes. They do have those kind of things. So that's interesting.
Because that's
But
very localized, right?
yeah, it's very localized. They even have ethnic minority holidays, which is interesting because I look at Eid al-Fitr and Eid al-Adha, which are
Mhm.
also pretty big, like Diwali as well. I think Diwali is celebrated in a lot of countries as well, and probably not in the Western countries. But Diwali, Eid al-Adha, those kind
Yeah.
of holidays are definitely celebrated in certain parts of Asia, certain parts of even Africa, I think, the Middle East, but also in South America and the Caribbean. So that's really, and even in the US, probably in some states, but I'm not sure about that. And I'm pretty sure that it's often connected to ethnic minorities or religion as well, that they do celebrate it, because the fasting, we know two kinds of fasting, right? The Islamic fasting and the Christian fasting, which is also a thing, and those
Could
differ a little bit as
actually
well.
never thought about that. Could you elaborate on the difference between those two?
So
Is it more the process, or is it like the meaning surrounding it, like the tradition surrounding it, or if you look
oh
at it
i'm
on an
so
individual
i'm so gonna
level?
watch this. So I'm afraid to say something because I probably will get it wrong, but there's an interesting thing with difference. Like, if I remember correctly, because the Islamic fasting is you fast and then you open up, you fast, and then you celebrate the end of it, right? Basically, the
Mhm.
celebration is, if I remember correctly, at the end. Whereas the Christian fasting um, often goes towards Easter, but especially for the Catholics, it starts with Carnival.
That's in February.
Yeah. So they go out and party during Carnival, and then they go into a period of fasting towards Easter.
Interesting.
So kind of removing the sins. But please don't quote me on this. I could
Mm.
be like, if somebody knows this, you feel free to correct me in the comments, or feel free to reach out to tell us the full story. But that's how I
I'm
think I
actually
remember it.
curious if anyone knows somebody who is well versed in this topic. Like, it is something to
Yeah,
to explore.
but
Like,
it's
now that you
different as
mentioned it, it
well,
piqued my curiosity. How
because
different?
the Islamic fasting is really strict. So you really have a slot. Basically, it's between sunrise and sunset
Sunrise and
that you're
sunset.
not
Yeah,
you're
sun.
not
Yeah.
allowed to eat anything, and in some cases not allowed to drink anything. Like, the true traditionalists don't even drink during that time period.
Mhm.
I think for children they allow them to drink, so that might be a big difference as well. But compared to the Christian fasting, which I think is mainly alcohol, if I'm not mistaken. So, Consuela, feel free to enlighten us a little bit about Christian fasting, and if it's always during a certain time period, and if it's indeed between Carnival and Easter or not. So it's definitely different. The Islamic fasting is much more strict, especially, and it's really between sunset and sunrise and sunset. So it's a long day, and it's also interesting how that might play a role into. And now I'm getting into the sports topic, but it being interesting for people to play in Saudi Arabia, the professional football players to play in Saudi Arabia, especially if you practice a certain religion where that becomes a thing. So, uh, Consuela says yes, between Carnival and Easter, you have Lent. So basically, it's much more of like, hey, we party during Carnival, and then you kind of clench your body towards Easter, compared to the Islamic kind of fasting, where it's really it's a certain sacrifice. Both are a certain sacrifice, actually. That's what they do have in common.
On sure, and it's less focused on not eating and drinking. Interesting.
Yeah, it's more about being a good person, or yeah, being a good person. It's much more like that, and there's different takes
Yeah,
in
because
different
fasting
religions.
is, as how I know it, is basically focused on resetting your body. It's more about the body and the mind, and not having any intake or something like that.
More focused on behavior, so no cursing, I think, plays a very big role as well.
Fasting from certain words,
Yeah.
certain word use.
So I think it's really interesting, and if you look, and so again, it's tied together to a different kind of living, and I think those national days kind of have like a similar idea. It's to bring diversity and be able to celebrate days. And I think from that perspective, it's a really good thing. And one of the benefits is that slowly you get, for different kind of topics, you get national days to create us awareness as well. So I think from that perspective, like autism, for instance, there's also a national or international day of autism, something that to spread awareness about autism and what autism is, which
That's
is,
April
I think,
2nd,
a good thing.
FYI.
Yeah. So these are kind of things that I think the benefit from it is that we're getting more aware of different kind of things that are being celebrated, or we're trying to understand it better. From that perspective, it's great. The downside is that there's so much that you can't follow it all, and you can't convince others that your day is important if they don't have any, like, connection to it. So a lot of these days are just being wasted.
Wasted is maybe a strong word for some people, because, as you said, a lot of localized areas, it means a lot there. A lot of the holidays we have here in Suriname would not apply to anywhere else, not even our neighboring countries. So I think it is interesting to look at the ones that have not national in front of them, but international or world, because these have a broader impact, right? And a list I would look at with more, more weight would be the UN list, because this has been formalized by the UN in the
Okay,
documentation and recognition as well.
let's go into
And
it.
and a lot of these are basically for global issues. And
How
I've
long is
seen
the
a lot.
list, by the way? How many are being recognized
It's
by the
actually
UN?
not that long. So I would say for 1 month has max 20,
Oh, but that's
around
that
20.
yeah, but we're talking at least 150 to 200 days,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Like January has the least. It's 3 days only. Like from
Okay,
the
let's
list of
just go.
international days on the UN.
What's your
And
favorite from the list?
from the list, I need to go through the list, but
Okay, let's
like
just do August because there's so much.
tourism,
Let's just do
because
August.
tourism caught my eye, would be an interesting
No,
one.
but tourism is
Uh,
September, so I was talking August.
okay, August would be. Let me go through it. Uh, International Youth Day would be an interesting one. World
I think
Humanitarian
International
Day.
Youth Day is definitely the most interesting one. Um, or International Day of the World's Indigenous People. That's also
Yeah, I
pretty cool.
was looking at
Yeah,
that one as well. Yeah.
yeah. But I mean, like International Day against nuclear tests. So how does that work?
I actually have no idea how that one got approved, but I'm gonna open the document as well,
So I think
because
that's interesting to mention for the people that are joining and listening or watching. Is like these lists from the UN, they have like complete documentation on why it's an international day or turned into an international day, which is pretty interesting.
actually gonna put it right here on the screen. So if you're interested, go there
Yeah.
and you'll find a list of days. But yeah, as you mentioned, a lot of these international days are linked to the UN goals as well. The SDGs
Yeah, they're
have
pretty
been
much
top of
societal issues.
societal issues, and very like mental health day, translation day, languages. These are things that kind of affect every corner of society. And that's why they recognize it. The nuclear one, I don't know yet. Maybe it's because of nuclear energy, but
Yeah, of course it
that
has
might be
something to
some
do with it.
controversy in that. Languages
But for
day,
me,
that is quite interesting as well.
the thing is like I look at it, of course, from a marketer's perspective, and from that perspective, not many days on this list are very usable. It's not like my clients are going to be today we're going to celebrate the International Day of Commemoration and Dignity of the Victims of the Crime of Genocide and the Prevention of this Crime. I'm like a little bit difficult, a little bit difficult.
But that's
So
where the niche days come in, right? The
no, but I mean that's like these are considered international days. I don't even understand the sentence. Commemoration of and dignity of the victims of the crime of genocide and the prevention of this crime. It's such a complex international day. Like
it's
if you
very
would have to
specific.
translate it to make a social media post surrounding that topic, it's most likely going to be the UN that will have a post about this. Even the UN might not even post about this on their socials, right? So it's very
I
formal,
do think
very
the UN
formal.
would post these on their socials,
Yeah, I'm going to check. We're
like
definitely going to
nowadays.
check.
Like,
So on December
especially
9th,
maybe not by then, but I opened
yeah.
up a few of these, and a lot of them are quite recent, 2019,
So
2020.
remember December 9th when they also post about the International Anti-Corruption Day, if they
Yeah.
also post about the International Day of Commemoration and Dignity of the Victims of the Crimes of Genocide and the Prevention of these crimes. Yeah, so
Uh,
please remember me on December 9th. Send me a message, or send me a comment on one of my posts on December 9th to see if the UN kept up with this and also posted about that extremely long name day, which is, just to clarify, it's a very serious issue. Genocide is a very serious issue. But the way that the formal way that International Day is written down kind of makes it, from a marketeer's perspective, kind of impossible to
like
create
how
a
are people supposed to adopt it, like commemorate
yeah.
it? Like
So there's definitely, and of course, those days don't need any commercialization whatsoever. Like, what kind of shirt are you gonna wear? Like a shirt that says genocide and then an X through it? I mean, there's like no a way to, well, there probably is, but it's really far-fetched if you're going to go towards that. So I think that's also
yeah,
why
this
I
is
do
also the
like the
distinction between
national
types of
days.
days, right?
Yeah,
The distinction between types of days. Some are commemorative, some are to bring awareness. And I think a lot of these from the UN are to bring awareness to more serious issues, whereas the national days are more fun, more celebratory, more engaging,
yeah,
I would
yeah,
say, for people.
yeah,
And one last thing on this list, I actually see on this list World's Children's Day is on November 20th, whereas in the beginning of our conversation, we had Children's Day, as we know it from the Dutch, is December 5th.
yeah,
So that's kind of also
yeah,
some days are recognized on different dates by depending on the
yeah.
domain in which they
So there,
are.
it's also difficult because you don't. December 5th is World Soil Day, for instance, and that's relatively new. And there's even another. So that's interesting about this list as well. A lot of days that are on the same day. So, for instance, World Soil Day and International Volunteer Day for Economic and Social Development. Those are on what's considered here Children's Day. So that
Yeah,
also brings
World
into
Soul
that.
Day is from 2013,
Yeah.
so it's quite recent.
But yeah, in general, I think I don't mind it. I don't feel there is going to be enough emphasis on it. And I definitely think there will be some national and not so international days that will get much more recognition than these international days listed by the UN, because they're better to commercialize. So that's true. So December 5th is a Christian holiday. It's the day of St. Nicholas, but we're also looking at it from, on this list of international days, there are no religious days, are there?
No,
So I think that's how they kept it safe for themselves.
it's more like very societal. Like, can you scientifically or like social scientifically
And they're
engage with
also,
it?
and it's much less diverse in the sense, like we mentioned World Tourism Day in the end of September, but then you also have like a tourism day in February, which is just different, but it's Global Tourism Resilience Day. So there are a lot of these um, kind of topics that get covered much more, and certain topics that don't get covered at all. Um, Also interesting how few international days the United Nations has listed for January. That's also
Hmm.
something really weird. So, but yes, these days has been listed for a reason. The only thing is, for me, from a marketeer's perspective, the UN list, it's good that it's there uh, because of the societal issues, but and most likely most of the things will not catch on as much as, like, say, a Valentine's Day, because of the
Or
commercial
a tooth
value
fairy
of
day.
Valentine's
Like
Day.
you can do a lot of fun stuff with the tooth fairy day, if you so choose. I
Yeah,
think
well, I think it's a
the
missed opportunity.
obscurity, yeah, the obscurity has a certain charm to it as well. Because if you have a very niche day and not a lot of people know about it, it's easier to
If
tap
I was
into
a
the
dentist,
commercialization.
I if I
It
was
is
a
easier to.
dentist, I would commercialize the hell out of International Tooth Fairy Day or National Tooth Fairy Day. Definitely, definitely. I mean, we celebrate Social Media Day. like in our respective field, we celebrate June 30th as Social Media Day. We still do every year. It used to be the conference day, but social media Suriname, the social media conference in Suriname used to be on June 30th as well. I think we did it a couple of times on June 30th. But then we moved it to October. So we celebrate Social Media Day separately. And it's not celebrated enough, I feel. We don't.
Why do you feel it should be celebrated more from a marketeer's perspective? Because
No,
from
I
my
don't even think from
perspective,
a that's the
no,
problem that I have.
from my perspective, it is another niche holiday that has been come into existence due to the evolution of technology and how we consume media in that sense.
So here's the thing. If you really wanted to make it a national day, you would have to take, and actually, the organization that used to organize it in the beginning, Mashable, Mashable had this, like, they had all the documents in place that you could download, you could change and go to the local government and say, like, hey, we want to officially celebrate and commemorate this as a national holiday. And I never felt obligated to do it to that extent, right? Because in the end, you're gonna have to like lobby to get that day listed, officially listed as a national recognized day. But that's on one hand. On the other hand, I do like it when people spend a little bit more time celebrating the fact that social media exists on June 30th. I wouldn't mind that. I would be willing. The problem is that in the end, it's gets commercialized, and we're even. I'm pointing a finger at myself here, in the sense that we use it to do workshops and to share skills instead of just do end up with a celebration, but it's not like a giving back celebration like the end of the year is like Oriarius, for instance.
So I think that's mostly covers these interesting days. And of course, there's always gonna be some scrutiny, some challenges because others feel not represented. And that's the fun of it, I think, as well. Because a celebration should be out of goodwill. People should want it. It shouldn't be forced upon it. Yes, the UN is kind of a separate thing. But if you're talking about these niche holidays, these 500, 5,000 national days that just pop up out of nowhere every day, basically, another one pops up. And I think people should just celebrating if they feel like they belong, like social media day, but it shouldn't be obligatory, or it shouldn't be something that you think, oh, I'm not celebrating this, and oh, my company is not doing this. Am I not hip enough? No, it's just something people do for fun, and it's maybe small grassroots movement that start them. And if you resonate with it, go for it. If it's not prominent in your region, maybe that's an opportunity for you to kind of bring more awareness to it. And as you said, Tooth Fairy Day, if you're a dentist, commercialize it, make it so that people recognize you for something. Because at the end of the day, it is something that it's easily recognized, and you can recur it every year, like annually, to refer to, oh, this day or this specific period, we're gonna give back to the community or celebrate something within that context.
So I do want to give credit to some organizations. And the reason why I'm saying that, like on July 15 was World Youth Skills Day. And I had a really busy day on that day because multiple events organizers in Suriname approached me to be present at their events. So on that particular day, there were several events in Suriname going on celebrating Youth Skills Day. So that was pretty interesting. So some of these days are really being adapted as well. And I also think we shouldn't underestimate the importance of religion in some cases. It's a really big factor. And I think the best thing, the biggest compliment is when people from other religions adapt a
Hmm.
national day or a holiday from other religions. I think that's
Yeah,
it that should be something that we should strive for in this world,
it's
to kind
basically
of
the
build
accept
the
the
empathy
cross
and the respect,
cultural.
but bring it cultural. And I think it's really interesting. And I want to, like, for instance, I don't know if you're familiar with MASH and Guyana.
No.
So Guyana decided to mash two holidays together. So they mashed Carnival and Holy,
Hmm.
because those were two kind of big national or international holidays that they wanted to celebrate, and they decided just to mash them together. So instead of celebrating Carnival and then celebrating Holy separately, they just brought them together.
They celebrate the Holy Carnival.
Basically, which is really interesting because we just spoke about two different religions and fasting and bringing them together. I mean, that's, I feel it's one of the under, yeah, it doesn't get enough attention for how special that is that they decided to do that. I'm also not familiar with how it's received and how well politically it's received as well, but it's really interesting that they did that. And I also once did a research on why there's not that much of a carnival celebration in Suriname. So if we talk Suriname carnival, we mainly talk either about the Brazilian carnival that we kind of adopt because there are a lot of Brazilians living in Suriname, or the Dutch carnival, which typically only gets celebrated in Suriname by the Dutch interns that come to Suriname and want to celebrate carnival as well. And then you start wondering, especially in the Netherlands, they only celebrate carnival in the south, which is
It's
really,
localized there as well.
it's localized there as well. And I started digging into this because I was just fascinated by it, because I would escape the south during carnival because the way they celebrate, the Dutch celebrate carnival is completely different from the Brazilian celebration. Um, and what I realized, and that's something that I learned through a course while studying, is that there's a very big religious divide between the north of the Netherlands and the south of the Netherlands, um, which there is a lot more Christianity, and especially I think the Catholics are more prominent in the south as well. And if you go through all the countries in the Caribbean where carnival is a really big, traditionally, not built up from scratch, but traditionally, where it's big, you will see that these countries all have a very, very big Christian demographic or even a Catholic demographic. So all the countries where traditionally speaking carnival is quite big, all those countries have a very big Catholic uh, population. And that's the reason why Suriname doesn't really have it, because there was no religious movement behind
Yeah, there's no
having that
dominant.
celebration. There's no
Yeah.
dominant religion that celebrates it, whereas Holy, there is a dominant religion that celebrates it. So that's a very interesting perspective. And to close it off, there are even some, I have to look back into this. I'm not sure if it's Grenada or another country, but there are even some countries in the Caribbean that also don't have this strong religious ties to it, that have decided also to change the dates from their carnival to later in the year and celebrate it in August, for instance, because they didn't
Mhm.
want to compete with the bigger company of the countries where everybody goes during carnival, and they created their own carnival and they created their own folklore, which is really cool because they decided to create their own folklore based on stories of the national cultural stories and those kind of things.
I think
That's
those
really,
instances
yeah,
are beautiful because it just shows it can evolve and stories come from somewhere. culture comes from somewhere, traditions come from somewhere, the celebration of the days comes from somewhere. So even if something is very new, it could very well be that 100 years from now, it
Yeah,
is something that's still there,
yeah,
and we don't know what can happen. So I'd say this was a quite an interesting topic to be had, and especially the international day and the national days. So if you are celebrating something specifically, all the power to you, share it. But you know, don't just go on the hype train if you don't know what it's for. Some things can just be for innocent fun, but some have some deeper, significant meaning behind it. So do respect that. Maybe we should have a Confoes day one day. We nominate a certain day for a Confoes day. We don't know
yeah.
yet.
International Conversation Day. Isn't there already an International Conversation Day? We have to look that up. I'm looking that up
That
straight
would be
away.
interesting. But
International
uh,
Conversation Day.
while you look that up, with that being said, this was another episode of Social Convos. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/@convos. We're also on Instagram @convos. And also subscribe to our newsletter at convo.substack.com. All the episodes are also being uploaded there. We are, I think most of the migration has already happened. So you might not see the updates regularly on the website for now, but the recent updates are on the Substack. So check that out. With that being said,
Awesome.
Jean-Luc, roll us out.
To close it off, next year on July 12th, 2024, Social Confoes will be celebrating New Conversations Day. And during that day, we'll try to get as many former podcast guests back on the show to have new conversations. I think that's a great way to close it off. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll be back for the next episode next week. Same place, same time. Bye bye.